Hey, folks, imagine this. You're a student at Harvard, shelling out tens of thousands for an education that's supposed to broaden your mind, but only 3% of your professors lean conservative. 3%. Does that sound like a marketplace of ideas to you, or a one-way street to groupthink? That's the firestorm Education Secretary Linda McMahon walked into at a Senate hearing on June 3, 2025, and it's why we need to talk about what's happening in our universities. This isn't just policy wonk stuff, this is about the soul of education, the future of free thought, and whether our kids are being taught to think or to conform. So, buckle up, because we're diving into this clash between McMahon and Senator Chris Murphy, and I'm breaking it down from a perspective that values free speech, personal responsibility, and cultural stability.
To understand what the Department of Education is doing with respect to the threats you've made against institutions of higher education. In the letter that you sent to Harvard, I'm demanding that they make certain changes. You told them that they had to end all of their diversity programs, but that they had to institute viewpoint diversity. That doesn't seem to make sense. How do you tell them to end all their diversity programs? And we assume that this is a mandate that you will make of other schools as well. How do you ask them to end diversity programs while instituting viewpoint diversity? This seems to be totally contradictory.
No, the diversity programs that we've asked and demanded to be eliminated were the DEI, where they were, those programs actually were pitting one group against another.
Isn't viewpoint diversity a diversity program?
A viewpoint diversity is exchange of ideas that's actually better. Absolutely. Now here, because Harvard only has 3% by its own numbers, 3% conservative faculty. Do you think they are allowing enough of viewpoint diversity through that teaching?
Where in the statute does it give you the ability to cut off federal funding for a university based upon your decision, your determination that they don't have viewpoint diversity? Can you cite to us statute and authority that Congress has given you to micromanage the viewpoint diversity of a college?
Well, certainly now let's back up.
Well, no. I think that's really important.
No. I'm going to answer your question.
Can you cite a statute? Is you can't cut off funding for universities unless you have a statutory authorization to do so. So what statute gives you the right to tell any university that they have to have a certain mixture of viewpoints?
So here's what happened with Harvard.
No, it's very simple. I don't mean to provide being hostile.
Well, I think you some background. The statute's Title VI. These were civil rights violations. That is why we filed a case and defunded or stopped the funding for a while for Harvard, as well as we did Columbia. And in that conversation with them, we talked about different things that they should do coming back to the table to make their programming better. The president of Columbia absolutely indicated, as well as the president of Harvard, that they needed to do things on their campus to eliminate anti-Semitism. That was kind of the crux of what brought us into talking to the different universities. And then we sat down with them to say, okay, these are other issues that you need to address on your campus because you do receive federal funding. And under federal funding, if you are breaking the law, which they did under Title VI.
I know. I don't understand any conception of civil rights law to give you the authorization to micromanage viewpoint diversity on campus. That's not authorized under the civil rights title provided to you by the United States Congress. Thank you very much.
Senator Merkley.
Let's start with the problem. McMahon told the Senate that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, DEI for short, are pitting one group against another. She's calling for their elimination and pushing for something called viewpoint diversity instead. Why? Because places like Harvard, with only 3% conservative faculty, are echo chambers. They're not teaching students how to wrestle with tough ideas, they're feeding them a script. From a conservative lens, this is a crisis of intellectual freedom. We believe in the individual's right to think critically, to challenge the status quo, and to hear all sides, not just the ones the ivory tower deems correct. McMahon's argument is that DEI programs often prioritize identity over merit, creating resentment and division. I've seen it myself, students afraid to speak up in class because they might be labeled as problematic. That's not education, that's indoctrination. Now, let's unpack the exchange. Senator Murphy came at McMahon hard, saying her push to end DEI while mandating viewpoint diversity is contradictory. He asked, How do you end diversity programs while instituting viewpoint diversity? Fair question, right? But here's where I think he misses the mark. DEI focuses on demographic quotas, race, gender, you name it. Viewpoint diversity is about ideas, not skin color. It's about ensuring a conservative student or professor isn't silenced just because their views don't fit the progressive mold. McMahon pointed to Harvard's own numbers, 3% conservative faculty. That's not diversity, that's a monopoly. From where I stand, she's not contradicting herself, she's calling for a fairer playing field where ideas, not identities, duke it out. Murphy pushed back, demanding to know what statute gives McMahon the power to cut federal funding over viewpoint diversity. She cited Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, arguing that DEI programs can discriminate by prioritizing certain groups over others. Now, this is where it gets spicy. Like me see Title VI as a tool to stop reverse discrimination, policies that, under the guise of equity, end up punishing people for their race or beliefs. For example, if a university's DEI hiring practices sideline qualified conservative candidates, that's not fairness, it's bias. McMahon's point is that federal funding shouldn't prop up institutions that play favorites with ideology. Murphy, though, argued that Title VI doesn't cover micromanaging campus viewpoints. Legally, he's got a point, Title VI is about race, color, and national origin, not political ideology. But argue that DEI's overreach often bleeds into discriminatory practices, and that's where the fight is. Let's take a step back and look at the other side. Liberals like Murphy argue that DEI programs are essential for leveling the playing field for marginalized groups. They'd say viewpoint diversity could dilute efforts to protect minorities or even open the door to discriminatory hiring under the guise of balance. I get it, nobody wants to see hard-won civil rights rolled back. But here's the rub, when only 3% of faculty at a place like Harvard are conservative, are we really protecting everyone's rights? Or are we just swapping one form of exclusion for another? The left might say McMahon's push is a Trojan horse for conservative agendas, but I'd argue it's a call to restore intellectual honesty. Students deserve to hear from all sides, not just the ones that align with the faculty lounge. This isn't just about Harvard or Columbia, folks. It's about whether our universities are training grounds for free thinkers or assembly lines for ideology. If we value personal responsibility, we have to trust students to grapple with tough ideas. If we cherish free speech, we can't let campuses become safe spaces for only one worldview. And if we care about cultural stability, we need institutions that reflect the diversity of thought in this country, not just the coastal elite's version of it. McMahon's stance isn't perfect, and the legal debate over Title VI is far from settled. But she's shining a light on a real problem. Our universities are failing to prepare students for a world where ideas collide. Here's my moral stance: education should be a battlefield of ideas, not a bunker for one side. We owe it to our kids to teach them how to think, not what to think. McMahon's push for viewpoint diversity is a step toward that. It's not about forcing on campuses, it's about giving every idea a fair shot. If we let universities become ideological fortresses, we're not just failing our students, we're failing the future of our democracy. So, what do you think? Is McMahon right to take on DEI and push for viewpoint diversity, or is this a step too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every single one. And if you believe in fighting for free speech and real diversity of thought, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to keep the conversation going. Let's keep pushing for an education system that respects every voice, not just the loudest ones.